Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is 4 really fun and different breakfast ideas. These would make great brunch ideas or weekend breakfast ideas. These would also make really fun ideas for breakfast for dinner if you're into that kind of thing. These are a little more on the heartier side and I just had a lot of fun with these kind of different recipes. I hope you enjoy them. If you are not subscribed already, I hope you will subscribe. I post videos at least once a week. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, I'm going to start with a recipe for biscuits and gravy. This recipe is inspired by Joanna Gaines. I love her and her Magnolia Table cookbook. I have both of them. They're such good cookbooks. But I put my own twist on it. So I am adding about a cup to 2 cups of white button mushrooms. I chop them up very finely so that they are not detectable by children, as finely as you can. And I also added a couple of yellow onions, again diced up very finely. For this recipe, I use a pound of regular sausage, ground pork sausage. You can use breakfast sausage. This works really well in the gravy. So I start in a heated cast iron pan and I start cooking the ground sausage. Just make sure you break that up very finely so that it is in really small bite-sized pieces. For the biscuits, I am using canned biscuits, just Pillsbury biscuits. Joanna Gaines does have a recipe and I've been meaning to try it, but for now on busy mornings or evenings, whenever you're making this, I find it easier to just use the canned biscuits. So someday I'll try them from scratch, but for now this is just what I do and I just bake them according to the package instructions. Then after the sausage is done cooking, I am going to remove it from the pan. I did want to say I love my cast iron pan. If you have been wanting to try a cast iron pan, don't be intimidated. Just do some Googling, search for care tips on Pinterest. It's really simple once you get your head around it. It was just a little bit of a learning curve, but I love my cast iron pan. You don't put it in the dishwasher or wash it with soap and water, so just make sure you do your research, but it's definitely worth getting to know because they're just so much fun to use. So I've removed my sausage, I'm melting some butter, and now I'm adding the chopped onion and mushrooms, and I'm just going to saute those until they are soft and coated in the butter. And you could really add any veggies you want. I like onions for the flavor, and I like the mushrooms because they don't really change the texture. They kind of blend well in with the texture of meat. They don't taste too, crunchy or anything like that. So I thought they were a good addition to just add some extra nutrients and stuff. But you could really add whatever kind of vegetables you want and probably whatever kind of meat you wanted too. Although I do think the spiciness of sausage goes well with the gravy flavors. Okay, that's all removed. Now we're going to melt half a cup of butter in there. Now, according to Joanna Gaines' recipe, she says to just use the sausage grease, but I did not have enough sausage grease. Every time I've made this, I've never had enough sausage grease to make the gravy with just sausage grease. So I will add either bacon grease or butter or some sort of fat in addition to the sausage grease and the other flavors that are in there. And so I'll add that, I'll melt that, and then as you see, I am just adding flour, a couple of tablespoons at a time of flour, and whisking it up. If you add it too much too fast, it'll be harder to combine. And then you want to give it a couple of minutes to kind of cook and bubble there so that it doesn't taste like flour. You just kind of let it cook and slowly continue to add a little bit more flour. After the flour is added and combined and cooked in, we're going to slowly add about a cup of whole milk. You can add additional milk if you think that it's not thick enough, but slowly you want to start adding in the milk. Again, you want to add a little bit at a time, whisk it together, let it all heat up and kind of start bubbling, and then add a little bit more and just add it until everything is combined and you feel like it is the good consistency. It will thicken a little bit as it cooks more, so just keep that in mind. If it's a little bit runny, that's okay. And when the gravy's done, add the meat and vegetable mixture and just stir that in all together until it is combined. And again, let that simmer. A lot of this recipe, a lot of my recipes I've realized through editing is like add a little bit of something, stir it together, let it simmer for a couple of minutes, stir it again, add something else, let it simmer, stir it again. I just noticed that when I'm editing, like that's a lot of the steps that I do, and I guess that's just the way cooking is. So if it sounds repetitive, I apologize, but that's just the way it is. Now I'm adding some pepper and salt to taste. I like a little bit of extra pepper, and it doesn't need too much salt, but since the veggies are in there, I find adding a little bit of salt is helpful. Here are the biscuits all done, and the gravy is also done when it is back to a simmer, and you can go ahead and serve it. I like to serve my biscuits and gravy with the gravy right on top of the biscuits. Some people like it on the side. One of my kids likes her biscuits and gravy all separate, and then her biscuit with some jelly on it. So that's another thought. If you are making biscuits, you can always serve them with jelly or serve them with something else too. But I think the gravy is just so good. I served mine here with a fried egg and some grapefruit on the side. And then you can see my kids' plates here with how they preferred theirs. So that is biscuits and gravy. I hope you guys try this recipe. It is so good. Now it's time for this delicious quiche. A quiche is basically like an egg bake with a pie crust, if you're not familiar. So this is another one where you can use whatever fillings you like. Here I am using a diced yellow onion as well as the rest of the mushrooms from the biscuits and gravy recipe. I had some leftover mushrooms, so I chopped those up and included those in this. I also have some leftover ham that I thought would be really good, and it indeed was so good in this. So I'm just heating all of those ingredients up. In the meantime, I am going to whisk together 8 to 10 eggs. I think I used 10 eggs, and as you could see before, the quiche was a little bit too large. It was like overflowing. So I'd probably use 8 eggs for this recipe, but I think I had a little bit of extra cream that I wanted to use up. That's why I added more eggs. Anyways, that's just how I cook. But, I'll have the real recipe listed in the description box below so you can follow that. I'm not very good at following recipes exactly. Anyways, so you add the cream and the eggs and whisk that together. Add a little bit of salt and pepper, and that's it for the filling. When that's all mixed together, go ahead and add the meat and vegetable mixture right into the bowl. Mix that together. Add a couple cups of shredded cheddar cheese. Gotta have some cheese in there. And that's all the fillings I add. I think that's as far as I could push it as far as things that my kids will eat. But again, you can add whatever filling, whatever ingredients you would prefer. For the crust, I am using again a boxed store-bought crust. I want to try making a homemade pie crust someday. Someday I will, master all of those homemade recipes. But for now, I take the easy way just a little bit. And honestly, this isn't that easy because as you can see, this does not roll out very well. Sometimes I don't know if it's because mine was like a little bit older or what, but it cracked. Anyways, it still tasted delicious. It doesn't matter if it was a little cracked. So I'm lining my pie dish with the pie crust, and then I'm just going to go ahead and pour the filling right in there. I didn't do any pre-baking of this pie crust because the recipe didn't call for that. And as I mentioned earlier, it was a little over full, very fluffy, but it was so delicious. This quiche was so good. It makes really great leftovers too. You just heat it up in little slices, and it's perfect to eat off of for the week. So another awesome recipe. Okay, now a really fun one. This is a breakfast pizza. I got this recipe from Pioneer Woman, Ree Drummond. If you watch the cooking channel or Discovery Plus, you may be familiar with her. We just got Discovery Plus, so I have been binge watching her stuff, and this I thought would just be such a fun one for the kids and just a fun thing to try. So I started by cooking a pound of bacon. This is how I cook my bacon. You probably have seen me do this before, but it's just, I just cook it in the broiler in the oven. It is low mess, so there's no splattering all over everything. I don't have to fry it, and it's a little bit easier because it doesn't require quite as much like maintenance, like watching it as you're cooking. You still have to keep an eye on it, obviously, but it's just a little bit easier. So this is how I cook my bacon. So I'm starting with that. And so while the bacon is cooking, I am going to start prepping some of the other ingredients for the breakfast pizza, including a green bell pepper, a yellow bell pepper, and a red bell pepper. I am just finely dicing these into tiny little pieces. And I think I had maybe like a third of each pepper left over that I ended up packaging away for a different recipe or something. I don't think I used this entire amount on the pizza. It was like a little bit too much, but that's okay. Peppers you can use in like any kind of recipe. Throw them in a egg scramble or whatever it is. Then I have my salsa and shredded hash browns for the rest of this recipe. So I'm going to start by sauteing the hash browns. I melted some bacon grease in there, and that is just, if you don't know, I save my bacon grease every time I cook bacon, and I save it in a jar in the fridge, and I'll use it. Here I'm using a little bit more from the bacon I just cooked, and I like to use that for frying things. After those have cooked for a little bit, I'm going to add the peppers in that mixture as well and mix it all together. I think in the recipe she kept them separate, but I didn't see the harm in just mixing it all together. One less step when layering the pizza. When the bacon is done cooking, you do want to leave it a little bit undercooked. I forgot to mention that before. So don't fully cook your bacon. I like my bacon crispy, so this was hard for me, but it's going to cook more on the pizza. So you don't want to fully cook it. Just cook it until it is just a little bit floppy. And then you're going to chop it into pieces like so, about, bite-sized pieces. Taste a little bit just to make sure it's good. And you got that chopped up, and then you're ready to make the pizza crust. So again, I cheated. I used a box mix for the pizza crust, but you'll see that I struggled enough with this. You wouldn't have wanted to see me try to make it from scratch. So I'm just mixing that up according to the box directions, and I am supposed to let that rise. So I did cover that with a damp cloth and let that rise for I think like 5 minutes. Again, just following the directions on the box. After that is all ready, I am putting it on this baking sheet. So I like to use these reusable baking pan liners. I got mine from Amazon, as you can see. I think you can get them from a lot of different places, but I love these because they're washable and it causes me to use less things like, you know, um, parchment paper and things that would be disposable. And I even stick them in the dishwasher, which I'm not sure if you're supposed to do or not, but I do. So far, so good. Anyways, so I spread out my pizza dough. I did bake it for I think like 2 to 3 minutes just to kind of get it set a little bit. And now it's time to layer up the pizza. So starting with some salsa. This is my homemade salsa that I can every year. Well, this year was the first year, but it's going to be every year because we love this salsa recipe. So salsa is the first layer of the pizza. The next layer is mozzarella cheese. This definitely gives it that real pizza flavor, having like a full layer of cheese in there, and the pizza crust, of course, helps with that too. But this is just a really fun recipe with a lot of good flavors. So anyways, after adding the mozzarella cheese, it's time to add the hash brown and pepper layer. So just again, pile that on top. It seems like a lot of layers, and it is. This is like a pizza that you probably have to eat with a knife and fork, but it works out in the end. It's really good, and it all tastes really good together as well. So then after adding on this layer, it's time to add the bacon and just kind of strategically place that on there so that it doesn't fall off. And again, the bacon will further cook in the oven. And then comes the fun part. So after you've added your bacon and all of your other layers, I made little sort of divots in the toppings with a spoon for the eggs. This part made me so nervous, but it turned out fine. And you just crack your eggs right in those little divots, and they're gonna cook. So even if they leak a little bit, it's okay. And I would say as many eggs as you can fit. I think the recipe called for 8, but it's really as many as you feel like you can fit on there. And you could even eliminate this if you didn't want to add the fried eggs. You wouldn't have to, but it's kind of fun, isn't that? I mean, look at how cool that looks. So there it is. There's the breakfast pizza. Like I said, this was so delicious. I will say that this didn't heat up as leftovers very well because of the eggs. So if you wanted leftovers, you might want to skip the egg part or something. But other than that, this was a huge hit, and I definitely want to make this when we have company for breakfast sometime. All right, the last breakfast for dinner recipe or fancy breakfast recipe is for this bread pudding. This is another Pioneer Woman inspired recipe. She just has the most fun, family friendly, like filling recipes, and I just can't get enough of her stuff. So, there is this. Let's get into the breakfast bread pudding. So again, I'm starting with my pan and some bacon grease, melting that, and then I am sauteing a sliced onion. To that, I'm adding one chopped up red bell pepper, and that is it for the veggies. I suppose you could add whatever you like, again, as I always say, but those two were really perfect. The red bell pepper was so good. So then I'm also frying up a pound of breakfast sausage again. I did not end up using the full pound, I remember, because I remember using it in a scramble later, but I think it was maybe about 10 ounces that I needed for this recipe. As that is cooking, I am going to prep the bread. So I used a combination of whole wheat and white bread because I wanted to add a little bit of the whole grain. You know, I'm always trying to think of like the balance between healthy extra nutrients and also kid friendly. So I found this was really good. It wasn't too much of that like dense wheat flavor, but enough that it made it interesting. It tasted good and it had a little bit of extra nutrients in it. So I did a combination of white and wheat bread, and I just chopped that into slices, or not slices, chunks, chopped it into chunks, and I'm layering my baking dish here with that. This is one that you layer kind of like a lasagna. So you start with a layer of the bread, and then I will kind of show you as we go. But before I got into the rest of the layers, I wanted to mix up the egg mixture. So starting with, again, about 8 eggs, along with some cream and salt and pepper. That is it for the egg filling here. Whisking that all together and then setting that aside until we have all of our layers in place. So on top of the bread layer is a layer of the breakfast sausage, and then comes a layer of the onions and peppers. After that is a cup of shredded cheese. I used the Fiesta Blend cheese. You could use whatever you wanted. This worked very well though. And then you're going to do another layer of bread on top of that. If you have a dish big enough, you can keep going. I did add a little bit more sausage and a little bit more peppers as well. This is one that you're going to pour the eggs and they're just going to kind of soak through. So as you are filling it up, it's okay to kind of fill it up so it's overflowing. I poured my eggs in a little bit fast and I spilled a little bit, so make sure that you do this really slowly. And I do remember the recipe saying that this dish could actually sit uncooked overnight. I think it gets better if it sits overnight because all of the egg soaks into the bread more. I didn't do that this time, but it's definitely an option if you do have family, you know, staying overnight and you want something that you can pop in the oven in the morning. This would be a great option. So then, of course, top that with a layer of cheese, bake it in the oven, and there you go. This was so delicious. The eggs, the bread, everything together was very good, and this was another one that did actually keep very well. I ate off of this for several days after making this, and the kids ate it at least the first day, so that's a win. And that is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know which recipes you're looking forward to trying. I cannot wait to hear what you think, and I will talk to you again very soon. Bye!